If there is only one thing you need to learn and understand about Magna Carta 1215, it's this. Magna Carta 1215 is the sole peaceful means known to humankind by which the rights of the weakest, most innocent citizens can prevail over a massive, potentially corrupt, and oppressive state power. This is the voice of freedom, Magna Carta 1215 Learning Centre. Welcome to your next lesson with hosts Fitzroy and Carl.
Folks, welcome along to lesson number 12, and as always, joined again by the man himself, Fitzroy Sterling. How are you, my good friend?
Good evening, feeling a lot better. Don't sound as croaky, so I'm pretty happy about that. And yeah, raring to go and seeing what comes of it. It's going to seem like it's off track, yet this information that we're going through is quite pivotal, because if you're to understand the Magna Carta, you need to understand that it doesn't happen in isolation. It's part of a greater understanding. And so we're going to go into other aspects of understanding that connects with Magna Carta, and that is the conscience, because the Magna Carta is connected to our understanding of natural law through conscience. And so we're going to do a bit of work about natural law and conscience.
Well, we've certainly raised a few eyebrows after last week's show, got a fair bit of email and a lot of comment, a lot of very positive comment, and very little. In fact, I can't think of anything outside of trolling that was a negative. So a lot of the information that we're putting out here in the Learning Centre, Fitz, is actually resting on people pretty well.
Oh, I'm really pleased to hear that, because it can be a little bit confronting, some of the content. So I'm pleased it's been taken for the true spirit it's meant to be delivered in.
Well, I just want to acknowledge a few people we've got in the room. There's already 100 or more folks viewing. So hello, Sandra. Hi, Kerry. SM, Chris. Feed the Machine. Paul's back in. Young Boy Pete's T-bone steak. I like that. No, mate, there is no way I'm jabbed like the rest of the sheep. That's his young question. John, evening to you too. Natalie Ann, how are you, darling? Yes, we've got to catch up. I know you're going away. I've got to check my emails. Right, okay, good. Georgie, hello to you too. Scott, the news. I think I've covered everybody so far. If I haven't, we'll go back through it. Thank you very much for all your support, guys. And Fitz, we've got our new logo, which I thought I'd throw up on the screen and just let people get a bit of a look at. Maybe get some comment on.
Yeah, guys, we'd love to get some feedback on this, because it took a fair amount of work to get to this stage. So anything you want, positive, negative, doesn't matter. It's just feedback, and we'd love to see what your thoughts are, your first impressions.
Yeah, all good. All right. Well, without further ado, how about we let me remove the logo just for a moment and get into our presentation tonight. Now, this is where we left off last week, Fitz. Slide number 13 of, I think, 54 in this little package that you've sent me. It's a great mystery that through the human heart, that though the human heart longs for truth, in which alone it finds liberation and delight, the first reaction of human beings to truth is one of hostility and fear. That's a quote from Anthony de Mello. Nothing could be truer, Fitz, and we're living that right now.
Yeah, and I mean, some of this information that's going to be delivered is going to seem belligerent. So, that's the unfortunate side of it, that if you're hearing this for the first time, it's something about, how can this be true? No, that couldn't be possible. How, that's madness. That kind of stuff is going to come up for some people, I'm guessing. So the way I look at it is, if you're not ready for this information, guys, that's okay. This resource will still be here for a time that, you might want to come back and revisit it, where something might have changed in your capacity and your willingness to discover things that you weren't ready to discover. And then, just use it for that when you're ready. So if you're not ready now, that's fine. There might be a time when you will be, and then it'll probably have more power and value. But yeah, some of the content, like last week, is going to be a little bit confronting, if not intensely confronting, for some people who are not ready to hear this level of discovery.
All right, let's get into it. The metaphysical trinity. Can you explain this to us?
Yep, I just need you to move the slide up, Carl, so everyone else. Oh no, I'm looking at the wrong spot. Perfect. Yep. So this is really important to understand. So the Holy Ghost, the way it was done, the people who created these exoteric religions. So what do I mean by exoteric religions? I mean a religion where there's an external authority, an authority outside of yourself, right? So the three big ones are Christianity, the exoteric version, not the esoteric. And there's a prescriptive, there's the things you need to do, like actions you need to take, etc. That means that you are being spiritual, right? And so you've got the three big ones, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So what they did is they took the aspects of the consciousness, right? The three aspects. So here where it says Father, that's meant to represent the masculine aspect of your consciousness. I'm not saying it's what a male is, but it's what they call the masculine aspect of your consciousness. What that means is the will and the drive to actually go and fulfill some kind of function or action. And then on the other side where it says Holy Ghost, that was meant to be the feminine aspect of your consciousness, and that means your capacity for care, compassion. But as you can see, there's no mother, right? It says Holy Ghost. So what happened here is that they ghosted the feminine aspect of your consciousness. So then everything went heavy over to the left side of the brain, which is all about drive and will. And when it's overly excessive, the drive and the will, then you start getting into those authoritarian types of thinking states. And so hence that gave birth to the son. So you can see this is very masculine dominant. And so what they've done is they've even told you that this style of religious belief is going to be all about being authoritarian, or I can't even say it, all about being authoritarian. And if you really think about the actual Christianity that's being delivered today, there's a lot of authoritarianism about it. So just to give a quick, brief understanding of how religion was taken over to make sure that we go too much to one side of our capacity instead of staying in balance. Because if it was to be a father, a mother, then the birth wouldn't be to a son or a daughter, it would be to the light. And what that means is that you're giving birth to actions that are in support of life. So light means knowledge, and you only get knowledge through your conscience, because conscience is the only mechanism you have that is able to give you an objective difference between what people call right and what people call wrong. There's no other mechanism you have that gives you that objective capacity to see the difference between the two.
Sure.
And so that's what the true nature of the conscience is you take the different aspects of yourself, and when they meet in the middle and they meet in a balanced way, then you can give birth to an action that is in support of that which you say you seek. But the religion didn't do that. It took it over and made it top heavy in one direction. And in this case, it's a patriarchal structure here. Now, if you look at the word patriarchal, we went through this last week. The last words are archi, means archon. So it's male-dominated hierarchy, right? Male-dominated control structure. That's pretty much what this is telling you this is. Most people didn't get trained into understanding what this meant, so they just took it as this being something, that was preordained by some intelligent being. That's how they set out life to be.
Sure.
So we can move on to the next one, if that's okay. Oh, you're already there? Whoops.
Social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, conflating the natural world, that is the animal kingdom, with natural law, denial of conscience. Sentient beings are competitive by nature versus adaptive to conditions. Perpetuates superior and inferior beliefs. Institutions set up to serve equity inverted to propagate slavery through singular messaging, education, sport, arts, and a few other things.
All right, so we're going to go back from top to bottom. And so we'll start with survival of the fittest. So what social Darwinism did is it took the idea of the animal kingdom and it conflated it with beings with capacity for holistic intelligence. And that means that they have some kind of capacity to, what I said earlier, access a conscience, which is their conduit, I guess, that can help them access the difference between the objective difference, which we can all agree on, between behaviors that are life-serving and behaviors that are not. Right? Most of us can do that without really working hard. We can just have it because we have a biomechanism inside us, which is called our feelings, which allows us to know if we're having really unpleasant feelings, usually that behavior is not in the service of life, what we call wrong behavior. And if we're having pleasant, enjoyable feelings, then the behavior is in the service of life, what we call right. And so what social Darwinism does, it actually gets you to mix up the animal kingdom where we're all just competitive and it's the survival of the fittest, the strongest wins, which happens in the animal kingdom, to that's what we are like. We're greedy, that we're self-interested, we're self-obsessed, that we're competitive. That's what human nature is. It gets you to believe that.
So what do you say to those that would argue that the animal kingdom, if left alone to its own devices, sure, survival of the fittest does take place, and there is certainly a hierarchy. But we have seen in both wild animals and in domesticated animals, animals that would normally be, if you like, enemies, dogs and birds, or cats and birds, dogs and cats, that sort of thing, where they are now cuddled up. The TikTok is full of videos with, cuddly animals that should be tearing the faces or feathers out of each other, cuddling up and being quite social, being able to live together because they haven't been stereotyped. I don't know. There are a lot of people who believe that the animals can figure out how to live harmoniously amongst themselves. Why can't we? What do you say to those sorts of arguments?
I mean, it's the way it's phrased is like I'm actually just tripping over my tongue right here. So when you see those TikTok videos, those animals are not living in their true natural state, right? They've already got a level of pampering that they've gone through, right? So they're not actually needing to meet their base needs. So they're probably not starving, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So that there'd be a certain level of comfort that they'd be living under. That would be allowing them to, be able to go into a different state. But I'm guessing if they were starving, maybe their reactions would be a little bit different, as a guess. So yeah, but nature on its own, the natural world, the animal kingdom, actually does live in a balanced state, right? Because if there's far too many animals of any one breed, they will start eating too much of the vegetation, right? So it is a natural process of making sure that there's no overabundance of any one species. That's
Sure.
okay, but they don't have an actual conscience the way we do, right? They don't feel that real objective difference between what's right and what's wrong. They don't have that capacity to do that.
The cat won't feel bad about eating the bird, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it won't actually go, oh gosh, now I'm feeling really guilty and ashamed. It's not going to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because if it did, it wouldn't eat anything, right? It'd be a plant eater, but then its whole internal organism would have to be redesigned.
Sure.
So there's probably a reason why they need to eat other animals, and that's like a natural culling process of there being too much of anything. Just like flies are good food for spiders, you know what I mean? And spiders are good food for birds and so forth, right? So it's about not confusing the two. So what happens in social Darwinism, it says, well, if humans are at the top of the chain, right, we are the most intelligent, then it follows that there will be an even a distribution of a superior and inferior scale within our own species.
Yeah.
So it uses that. Well, if the animal kingdom has a scale of more superior and inferior, then we must too have it within our own species. See, it conflates the two, and that's a deliberate, like conscious choice to get us to confuse ourselves with the animal kingdom. But what makes us separate is we have holistic intelligence. So that's why that doesn't actually fit for us. We need to be programmed into that space. And that's what it says here. Sentient beings are competitive by nature versus adaptive to conditions. And that's what's really happening here is our conditions are constructed in a way where for us to survive, we only have the choice to be competitive. There is no other option there. So because we're adaptive to the conditions and environments, we adapt to that and we become competitive. We become greedy. We become self-centered because that's what's necessary for us to survive. So the reason why they give you that social Darwinism structure is because they don't actually want you looking at the conditions. They want you looking at our flaws, that there's something defective about each and every one of us. And therefore we deserve what we get and what we put out and all that stuff. That's a deliberate mind control trick to divert attention away from the actual structure that all of us are dependent on for our survival. We're not allowed to look at that. We are not allowed to actually investigate that. That's off limits. That's how these control structures work. They set the boundaries for you without you realizing they're being set for you. That's why it's called an invisible prison, because you can't see the actual walls, but they are there, and they're done through the mental realm. So that's as you can see there, it says perpetuates superior and inferior belief. I'm hoping I've explained that now, through that whole idea that, humans are superior to animals, therefore there must be a superior and inferior version of that within our own species. And then the institutions that are set up, they're set up to set the same system, right? So education, it teaches you to compete. Like if you want to go to a good school, what do you got to get? You got to get good marks. Well, not everyone can get good marks, can they? Now in sport, what's the purpose? Someone has to win. That's the whole point of why sport is played. There has to be a winner. Well, if there's a winner, what else does there have to be?
A loser.
There has to be a loser, right? So you have two choices when you go in sport. You're either going to be the winner or you're going to be the loser. Now, who wants to be the loser, right? What are the joyful feelings that come with being a loser? There's bitterness, resentment, animosity, shame, guilt. Who's going to really enjoy those feelings and want to have them repeated? So then, because you don't want to have that feeling, you might find other ways to try and become a winner, which we call, corner cutting, cheating. We have those things come up because we're so keen to avoid those really desperately uncomfortable feelings that we'll do whatever we require to get out of feeling.
Yeah, some people will, but, there are thousands of kids through to adults who turn up to footy training every week after losing a game the week beforehand, and they turn up to training to keep training to try and improve. And I'll use myself as experience here. Anybody who lived through the late 1970s, early 1980s and the Mortlake Football Club in Victoria will understand that the Mortlake Under-16 Football Club didn't win a game, I don't think, in my history. I think I vaguely recall them winning one, but when I was playing for them, and certainly prior to that and post that, we were lucky to kick 1 point a game. We regularly got beaten by 100 points a game. And yet we all turned up for footy training the following week. We all ran around. We were all able to kick goals at footy training. We just had bloody no hope when we got on the ground. So I would argue that that what you're saying, yes, is driven in part by some people, but that isn't the motivation of everybody. Those, like I say, there are hundreds of thousands of people who turn up for not just for football, for any sporting contest. Like I say, the loser in every sporting contest turns up for training again the next week, or they change sports or don't take up a sport again because they can't handle that competitive nature. Are you suggesting that having a competitive nature is bad?
I'm saying that we don't actually have a competitive nature. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that's programmed into us by our environment. Because when you say the team that doesn't keep winning, turns up again and keeps playing, there'd be more happening there on the actual connection level than there would be on the striving for the win. That's what's not being understood, right? Our true nature is what's happening, is that sense of community and that, striving for something better. That's what the drive is. Like, can we do better, right? That's what usually will drive a team to keep coming back. Can you be the most improved, right? So your goals aren't so much about winning. They're more about, well, what can we work on and enjoy the improvements of? So that's what generally my guess is would be happening under the surface. But ultimately it would be to know that feeling of being able to win somewhere in the back of your consciousness. That would be sitting there. Because you're playing in a structure that requires that. So that's the part where the people don't do that real deep work. They just sort of enjoy the community experience, but they're not actually really digging in to go, well, what's really behind this? What are the real deep underlying motivators here? Because if the goal wasn't to win, then why would you want to improve? You know what I mean? So you could actually know what it feels like to win, right? Why would you do that? You would just go, okay, we're just having fun losing, and we're just not even going to try and get better. We're just going to love getting whipped.
And as I recall, the Mortlake Under-16 Football Club Pie Nights were quite legendary, and well worth the price of having to go to footy training, even if we didn't win a game, because we used to have the Pie Nights quite regularly, and they were always good.
So then that sort of sounds like there would be something about the community aspect of it, right? Where you're coming together,
yes,
and where normally you probably would be just sitting at home alone, with your family, you know, in isolation, because we've been set up like that, that you can break from that habit and you can come together and have that social experience, the parents and the kids, where now there's that real community sense. And sporting clubs have that component, and they use that part that's innate in us. You know, that structure is used. Unfortunately, it's still to try and get people to understand that experience of winning and losing. It's coaching into them very early.
Yeah, and in certain sports, it's coached in much harder.
Yeah.
Moving on, fear of chaos.
Yes.
Fear of chaos. The fear of the possibility of chaos immobilizes courage, which paralyzes one's innate capacity to initiate a spontaneous, creative response. Hence, the willingness to accept the tyrannical rule of government with blind obedience.
Yeah. So this is a perfect example of why so many people were so quick to take these darts, right? The juicy darts, and try not to use the word.
Juicy darts. I'm liking the liking the phraseology.
I just came up with that on the spot, guys, because I was like struggling to think, what am I going to call this? So
the juicy dart. That's spectacular.
So why was that so easily uptake? You know, why the uptake was so quick and easy on that? Because there's that idea that if we don't start adhering to, you know, what we understand is safe, and that's being trained into the population as well, then there's going to be chaos. And we can't have chaos, right? So then we just do what we know, what we've been trained into, because we're fearing the possibility of what will happen if we do not. And that's usually what people are left to face. And then they just don't even want to look at it. It's like looking into the abyss. No one wants to look into the abyss. So they're like, well, I'd rather look into what I do know. You know, better the devil you know the old saying, right? Than the devil you don't know. And so what happens is when you have that fear of possibility of chaos, because there is no guarantees in life, right? People say it all the time. If you're so afraid, you never leave your house. But yet they don't see it when they're in that fear space. You know what I mean? They have that real intellectual understanding of it. But when it's actually them living it in the moment, viscerally in their body, that's when they don't catch themselves. And so what happens is when you fear possibility of of chaos, your innate capacity for courage to actually deal with the situation as it unfolds, that shuts down. You see, once you have that real confidence that no matter what comes my way, I believe in myself that I'm going to, no matter how tough it is, I'm eventually going to nut it out. I have that capacity, and that capacity can only come forward when you are open to giving to life from your heart, that you do not intend to harm anyone, but you intend to make life more wonderful for not only you, but everyone else around you. And only then does your creative capacity open up, because that's your true innate intelligence, is your creativity. But it can only work if your intention is to make life more wonderful for yourself and for everyone else. And that's the thing that's missing in the consciousness of the collective. They do not understand that because that knowledge has been kept from them. And so this is how people get controlled, is they've shown this idea of chaos is coming if they don't adhere to the rules, and then shut that part of themselves that has the courage, that has the capacity to come up with creative solutions in the moment, because we are just living moment to moment. There's no living in the future. That's just an idea. There's only now.
Yeah.
That's all that there is. There's nothing else. The past, that forms your memory base, and it gives you a history of, you know, what worked and what didn't. However, right now in the moment is when that can all be applied. There's no other moment, right? And if you want to control a population, you get them living into the future. That's what they did in Egypt. They increased their productivity over 30% by having them believe life was going to be better in the future, in the afterlife. And they didn't have to whip them or anything, to starve them or nothing. They didn't have to come up with any other tactics. They just got them to believe there's a better life waiting for them if they're good at what they do now. And so this is how that's all sold to the masses, right? It's sold the exact same way. There's no new tactics here. They're just packaged up differently. And so it's about understanding, if you have fear of chaos, you are going to be living in a slavery structure, because that's what it's designed to uphold. And this is the part about, you know, us grabbing, no, if we're going to live freely, there needs to be the possibility of chaos, and we need to be willing to accept that, because life has the full complement of options, not just some. You know, That's kind of what's trying to be expressed here, is that understanding that freedom comes from accepting the possibility of chaos, not cowering to the fear of it.
Yep. Well spoken. All right, we'll move on. Statistics look out at the world.
That's a statist.
Oh, statists, I beg your pardon. Look out at all the world full of strangers who have questionable motives and dubious morality, and they are afraid of what some of those people might do. That in of itself is a perfectly legitimate concern, according to Larkin Rose, the most dangerous superstition.
So that in itself sort of shows you what happens when you get into that fear of chaos, because you look at one another as being...
Explain statists to us.
Okay, so a statist is someone who believes that the state has legitimate authority. That's why they call it a statist. So that the state has legitimate authority to rule over over the people. That's what a statist is, So that means, people who you never met before, you know nothing about, they're required in order for us to live in some kind of organized, structured manner where there isn't chaos. Now, we know the reverse is true because we're experiencing it every day of our lives. Yep. But a statist can't see that. So that's just a term given to someone who accepts external authority, that man has legitimate authority to rule another man. That's pretty much what that means. And so if you have a fear of chaos, you're going to look at your neighbor and think, oh, they're looking a bit dubious to me. We need some way to make sure that I'm safe from them. That's not me, not my neighbors, but some other bigger authority, some other bigger body. You know what I mean? That we invest our trust into, so I don't have to be afraid of my neighbor. That's kind of what that's saying. And sometimes that can be legitimate, right? But then what the next slide is coming, that sort of shows what really happens with that fear and how it's appropriated.
All right. But then, as protection against what some of those people might do, the statist advocates giving some of those people of questionable virtue a huge amount of power and societal permission to rule over everyone else, in the vain hope that by some miracle, those people will happen to decide to use their newfound power only for good.
I just love that statement. I just love it.
Absolutely.
It basically says everything in how it works. When you're in that much fear, you're not thinking clearly about what have I just given my consent to? Because fear stops you from actually really getting to that deep level of discernment. You just want the problem gone by any means necessary. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's some people that you'll meet in life and they go, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to hear about that, mate. As long as I can go to the footy, have my beers, have my weekends, I'll take it. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of what that is. It's like, as long as I have my base level comforts, I'll swallow everything else that comes with it. Just don't take that from me. And that's the true nature of what we're living in today.
Yeah, and they're coming for your base desires, your base needs.
Yeah.
If you thought going out fishing on the weekend was going to be something you can do, forget it. They'll take your boat, they'll take your rods, they'll take everything.
Yeah, that's what's being granted authority to right now.
The statist looks at his fellow man and thinks, I do not trust you to be my neighbor, but I do trust you to be my master.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I can give that any more sort of body, because I reckon that just tells you everything, right? Because when you're in that level of fear, where you actually believe that your biggest enemy is your neighbor versus the actual state, if you can't make that distinction, and that's obviously the overwhelming majority of the population, then you've made sure that you are the best slave that you could ever be, because it's the mind trick,
I wonder what the neighbours of Dan Andrews in Victoria, of Anna Palachuk in Queensland, and I don't know who the goose is in New South Wales this week, Dominic Perrottet. I wonder what their neighbours think. I wonder what the neighbours of the bloke in Perth think, the guy who's running Western Australia and in South Australia, because this is exactly what you're saying here. You might have him as a next door neighbour, but do you trust him to be the master and run the state? What sort of a neighbour is he? I wonder in those cases, or whether or not you'd even bother trying to be able to talk to them. So
Yeah,
anyway, I'm
or-
getting off
or-
track. That's something else.
or
to go and chat about.
maybe they're of the same ilk. You know what I mean? There could be that as well. So if they're cut from the same cloth, maybe that's not an issue.
Yeah, maybe, and you got to think they've probably moved into suburbs that do make them feel a bit like that.
Yeah,
Almost
that's not-
every statist admits that politicians are more dishonest, corrupt, conniving, and selfish than most people, but still insists that civilization can exist only if those particularly untrustworthy people are given both power and the right to forcibly control everyone else.
So this one I love, because when this entire thing started in February 2020, I was like, what just happened? I remember them even on the mainstream media, they would just poll people and say, do you trust politicians, right? And they came up with, I think it was 75 or 80% said, no way, right? And then all of a sudden, it went from not trusting them to everyone adhering to everything they're saying. And I'm like, how is that just possible right now? And then when I saw this statement, I went, oh my goodness, that's it. This nails it, because I was never able to get it. I just couldn't get it. My brain was not able to understand. How do you go from saying full tilt, no, we don't trust any of them, to now we listen to everything they say, and that's actually there isn't a word of a lie in there at all. How do you just make that switch 180 degrees like that? I just didn't know that's even a thing. And then when I read this, I'm like, wow, this just nails it. So I'm hoping that helps explain it to people as well, if they were wondering, how did this just happen like that? Flick of a switch. How do people just forget about all their mistrust? Just gone, wiped.
Causal factors, ego. Oh, this is going to be a good one. The ancient psychologists know your psyche better than you do. They know that in order for you to willingly accept a lie, all they need to do is to provide the conditions that will make it irresistible for you to emotionally invest in the lie, and your ego will kick in and defend it to the death.
So let's just think about, let's just say that you want to start a business, right? And to do that, there's certain hurdles that you must jump through before you can even get that off the ground. You're so driven because you have the idea of the success that business is going to bring you. You're going to be your own boss. You're going to be in charge. You're going to get to actually, let's say if you had a product in mind that you really could see was going to benefit a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So you're wanting to, create something that's going to help, increase the well-being of those around you, and it's going to be popular, and you're going to be a success, and your innovative capacity is going to get put to use, right? So these are all innate things inside us. But in order to actually make that a reality, you need to go through these bureaucratic hoops, right? So once you've done and put all that energy into it, even though you've done it in a way that you don't even agree with, once you've set that in motion, you have now invested your time, energy, your future, all ideas you have in there. Are you really going to be willing to look at the true corners that you've cut, the soul that you've sold to get to that last hurdle that, that last ideal that you wanted to? Very few people are going to want to do that. That's why the people who had businesses, the overwhelming majority, didn't challenge anything, because that was their baby. They gave birth to it from nothing. So they weren't about to go and just go and chucking my baby down the road. They're going, I'm going to hang on to it, whatever I've got to do, even if it means selling my soul. So we talk about cognitive dissonance. This is the true nature of cognitive dissonance, is the ego attaches to the effort it's put in, and it's not going to look at what it did to get to the outcome. The means justifies the end. It's not going to look at that. It's going to cordon it off. And once you get to the ego to invest in that, it's like now taking over. It doesn't want to hear anything about like that it's been fooled. Not even interested, not even close. Shut the door straight away. As soon as that's happened, that's not even a possibility. So that's, one of the reasons why when people who are seeing what's really happening try and explain it to those who refuse, you're coming up against the impossible, right? In that movie, what was it called again? Usual Suspects. There's a line in there that I never forgot. And it says something to the effect, don't quote me on this, guys, but it's just a rough version of it. The greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince man he doesn't exist. Well, what that really means is the devil is your ego. The greatest trick the ego's ever played is that it doesn't exist. And you know how many people say, oh, I don't have an ego? No, I don't have an ego. No, you know, the fact that that's even being said, that's your ego denying its own existence. You need an ego, because if you don't have an ego, you can't survive. It's whether that ego is being overly indulged. That's the issue.
Yeah.
And so when you buy into doing something that you know you're cutting corners and acting outside of your consciousness to do, that's your ego that pushes you over the line to keep doing that, because it's wedded to the outcome. It doesn't care what it needs to do to get there. And it's the conscience is the one's going, oh, I'm not happy about this. I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable. And the ego goes, shut up, we're still doing it.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of what's in play here.
Yep. And I think we've all had moments in our lives about that. The ego only sees the world through polarity of right and wrong, and being ego, its function is self-preservation through preserving the mental construct of self-image or the false identity. Therefore, it will never accept that it's wrong, like you've just said.
Yeah, so basically it only sees the world through right and wrong. It doesn't see the world as a platform for learning. And so it can't understand that this wasn't wrong, it wasn't right. This was a pathway I needed to take to work out what was truly important to me and what wasn't. It doesn't do it that way. It has a very black and white function. And, and if you sidestep your conscience, then you've put yourself into that polar position where everything's a polarity. It's either right or it's wrong. And the ego has to be right. That's just when it's overly indulged, and it can never be wrong. And so that's pretty much what that's trying to say. And it's attached to this false identity, right? This false identity that you are your job, right? How many people wanted to keep their jobs because they didn't see themselves any other way than what their job was, right? The job gave them some kind of purpose. You know, there's no other way to get purpose than through their job. Yeah. You know, and also maybe the relationships they had in their work as well were important to them, right? Maybe they had some status in that position, you know, and they were looked up to. But outside of that, they were just an average Joe in the street, you know, so they were nobody, you know, so they loved that idea that they were important in that role. There's so many things happening as to why the job was like a pivotal like thing aspect that, you know, those who got what did I call it? The juicy, can't remember what I called it now. The juicy dart.
Juicy dart? Yes.
That those who chose that option, you know, there would have been an element of something about that identity that they've attached to, that earthly identity, not a spiritual one, but an earthly one, right? That their worth is attached to what they do in this social system, this social structure.
Absolutely. All right. Once activated, the ego gets super loud and suppresses the conscience because, to the ego, this is a matter of life and death, and to accept the possibility of vulnerability to being deceived is perceived as certain death to the ego, whereas the conscience will naturally pause and reflect.
Yeah, so I've seen this happen in real time, right? There's times when I've been speaking with people and the ego is protecting a particular idea, and then I'll be able to construct something in a way where I'll say it and you'll see it bypasses the ego and it goes straight into the conscience. And in that moment, what you see is their face freezes up and their eyes go really big, their eyes dilate. And then it's just a matter of counting the seconds until the ego goes, no, you don't. Do you know what I mean? And jumps straight back in and shuts it all down. And it's usually a 1 or 2 second. And then you can see it's just winding up. It's going, and snap. The ego just snaps into action. And then you've got some justification just showed up. It didn't make any sense, but it was a justification. So that's kind of what that's saying, right? Like when it gets activated, it gets super loud. Do you know what I mean? And it just won't have space for your true capacity for discovering objective truth. It shuts. It doesn't want to know anything about that. There's no chance that's going to even get a look in. You know, it has to protect itself. Where the conscience has a natural capacity to pause and reflect and learn and grow, because that's what the conscience is there for. It's to learn, grow, and expand. That's its purpose.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of, I'm hoping that's sort of helping make that make sense.
Manufactured perception. Deterministic factor of existence, appropriated for domination control by cultivating the belief in the existence of an external authority, creator, birth of exoteric religion. For example, there's nothing you can do, whatever will be, will be. The fate of all life is predetermined by the eternal authority, the creator, thus laying the terrain for the abdication of personal responsibility. Wow, that's
Yeah,
a
so
big one there.
yeah, I think we covered this last week, but we're going to lead into another one that's connected to this as to why that's here. So just to give it a quick one, guys, I'm pretty sure we covered this last week. So if you want more details on this, go back to last week's lesson, number 11. This is about, there is a deterministic factor in existence, but if you want to control people, you make it like it's something that's an authority that's outside of you. You actually create that belief that exists. And then people can have a special relationship with that external authority that is not inside you, it's outside of you. And that authority has a plan, you know what I mean? And we just give over to it, right? We submit to that plan because it's bigger and smarter than us. So why fight it, right? It's all going to work out in the end, right? I've seen that happen in real time. So I'll give you an example. What happened? I was teaching someone about the Magna Carta, etc. And we got to the end and it came to about, how you're going to print out the notices. And they said, well, I need to go to the library because my laptop or my PC is just really outdated. So I do it from the library. I'm like, oh, that sounds really painful. I don't know how you're going to be able to do that. And then they go, well, I would get a new one, but pretty soon we're all going to get quantum computers and a quantum phone, right? And I've just gone, what? Do you know what I mean? My brain nearly popped open then. And then when I said, hang on a second, how can you be sure of that? Where's that, where's that real, how can you discover that for sure? Like, where is the way that you can discover that? How do you know that's not another story that you've been pumped with to keep you from actually acting today, right now in the moment? Because I've been listening to stories like that for over 2 years and nothing's eventuated, right? And I said, how do you know that this whole idea that there's these good guys coming and stuff, how do you know that's not all an extension of the same plan where it's two wings of the same bird? In order for you to accept an attractive looking dynasty, they need to make the other one super unattractive and terrifying. So you're not even going to think about, what's really happening here. You're just running away from the problem and you're running into the arms of that which on the surface looks really appealing, right? How do you know that isn't a trap, right? And then they go, it's okay because God will never let that happen. That was it. And that was this. And I'm just going, wow. So up until that point, they were all really keen. And then we really saw what their safety net was.
The abdication of all personal responsibility.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow. That's showing me in real time how that really works. So the truth discovery of the deterministic component is this, as what I've come to learn, and what actually lands in a way that I can see is a way that I can verify. Did you want to read this one too, my friend?
Roger that. That which is predetermined is natural law. Natural law has two key components. The first, the laws that affect the material world. The second, the set of spiritual laws that act as the governing dynamics of the consequences of behavior of conscious beings with holistic intelligence. Yeah,
so the deterministic factors are that which you cannot change, right? So you cannot change that you have two eyes, a nose, a mouth, ears, hair. Some people don't. Legs, arms, fingers. You don't get to change that. You don't get to change how your bioorganism functions, unless you do something to it. But if it's living in its homeostasis, in its natural state, I can't even say homeostasis, it's in harmony. Unless you're going to do something to it, you don't get to change how that whole dynamic came together. You don't get to change the flora, the fauna, the way that it all harmonizes with the air and the land, the water, etc., blah, blah, blah. Fire, how that even starts. There are certain laws in place which make that possible, right? So that's the materialistic part of what's predetermined. And then the second part is the spiritual laws, right? That if there is an action that happens without your what's the word I'm after here? Without your beliefs, regardless of your beliefs, once that action is set in place, there is going to be consequences no matter what you believe, right? So you might believe that it's okay to be passive, right? And someone might come and kick you in the guts. It's not going to change the fact that on some deep level, you're going to have some kind of bitterness, resentment, or even some will to want to exact some kind of revenge on them, even if you suppress it and tell yourself, no, I'm a pacifist, I don't do that, right? There will be some part in you on a deeper level that will have a feeling response to that. And it will know that, because you know you've been violated. You know that your integrity, your physical integrity has been violated, right? And so you cannot control the actual emotional response that you get and whether you are carrying some kind of bitterness towards it. It's just going to be there. You know, that's not something you can control. That's predetermined. I'm hoping that's kind of helping to differentiate the two, because we have holistic intelligence, us humans. And so we understand there is a way to discover truth through a mechanism that shows us that it's actually objective, which is our conscience. Absolutely. And so we innately understand when things are violating and when they're actually giving.
Manufactured perception, the random factor of existence appropriated for domination control by cultivating the belief that existence is pure matter, that is a completely random event. Therefore, there is no meaning or purpose to life because it's completely random. There is no non-rational spiritual dimension to existence, only the material form. Atheism was born out of the belief in the randomness of existence.
Yeah, so like I said, these dark priest class, like the ancient psychologists, whatever, they take that which exists in nature and then they reappropriate it to attach to something that doesn't exist in nature. So there is a randomness to nature. But what they've done is they've come and created it so the randomness is nature itself, that it just, poof, you know, the Big Bang, it just happened. Yep. No explanation. And because it just happened randomly, there's no meaning to it, right? There's no purpose as to why it's here. And so if there's no purpose, no meaning, then there's no spirit, anything like that. When we die, we're just dead matter, right? And so what is atheism about? It's about that there is no purpose, right? That there's just a random event. And so we just like live as these flesh bots, you know, doing what we want. It doesn't matter what happens after that, because you just die. And that's it. Yep. It's all over, right? So that's that taking responsibility away from you as well. So it does the same thing. It takes responsibility away from what actions you take will echo into eternity. You know, we can't have people accepting that, because then they'll think about what they're doing to a deeper level. So they want to make it like, no, there's no consequences. You just die and that's it. It's over. It's over. See ya. Do you know what I mean? And so that's where the atheist idea came from, right? So the two versions of the same extreme. You know, the extreme is that it's something about us being like, just, there's no connection to anything bigger. You know, we're just like this clump of material.
Yeah, okay. Truth discovery, random component, the ability for beings with holistic intelligence to choose to either accept or reject truth. Those that reject truth have no understanding of natural law, therefore do not accept the responsibility for the consequences of their choice.
Yeah, so this is a really, really important one to understand. The only random component that exists in nature is our ability to accept or reject objective truth. And those who accept truth, they do it because they understand the consequences of not only accepting it, but the consequences of also rejecting it. And they take responsibility for that choice. But here's the real sort of dilemma. It's the very people who reject truth do it because they have no concept of the consequence of rejecting it. So therefore they cannot perceive or conceive that they are responsible for those very consequences of their rejection of truth. And so I'll use the masses who have taken the what do I keep calling it? The juicy dart?
The juicy dart, yes.
I've got to try and remember that and write it down. I'll use that example, right? So if you think about it, if they were fully invested in understanding that if I reject all this information that other people are sharing, right? If I reject that, that means that I am now going to be setting into play the very thing that I do not want in life. Now, if they came from that position, they wouldn't be rejecting it, right? They'd be listening to all the external information that isn't on mainstream. And they'd be going, because I don't want to be party to that. I don't want to give my energy to suffering. I don't want to give to self-inflicted suffering, actually. Why would I want to do that? That works against every aspect of my intelligence. That's not the life I want to live. But because they don't have that understanding, right, that's not even in their consciousness, they can't see the consequence for rejecting that which is verifiable. So then they don't actually attach to the actual responsibility for what they have set in place. Now, a perfect example of that is, I got told this story about a 24-year-old, a young woman who had 2 children. I think one was a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old, and her husband had left the room. And when he came back, she was dead, right? So we know pretty much guess what it was. She had the juice. And her family refused to talk about what could have been the cause. They just don't want it mentioned ever. Now, you got to think about those 2 young children no longer have their mother at such a young age. And no one wants to speak about what it is that was different that could have possibly led her to just drop like that. Like, you got to think about that level of denial. Like, that's a serious sickness that one needs to be in to actually shuttle that off. Because what has to happen? They need to realize that they made that choice to deny the truth. And now they are suffering the consequences because they refuse to take the responsibility of it then. And they're not sure as hell not going to take the responsibility for it now.
No.
And now they're in that perpetual state of denial for the rest of their natural living lives. Could you imagine that kind of hell?
No, that's a lot to think about. Certainly.
Yeah. And that's how important it is to really understand this statement.
The authority of truth. The acceptance of truth does not require deceit through rhetoric, overt and covert punishment, passive, aggressive coercion, aka reward, perpetual repetition of control, language, threats of confinement, and the use of deadly and or lethal force for compliance and obedience. Or lethal force. Compliance and obedience do, though.
Yeah. So anything that has real authority is that leaves you to choose for yourself. Anything that actually gives you the option of choosing or suffering is not an authority, because if it had true authority, it wouldn't need to force itself upon you. So it's when that happens that there's no real authority, right? So what is government? What does it do? Does it leave you with a choice to accept or deny what it's offering? No, it never does.
Yeah.
So that's why they're not a true authority. Because all they use is coercive methods, which are all listed here, And if you need to get people to comply, that's not authority. But truth doesn't do that. Truth is just there. It's for you to discover. And if you choose to accept it, you will live in a harmonious way. If you choose to deny it, and on the aggregate, that's what's happened. We've chosen to deny discoverable truth. Then you will live through self-inflicted suffering. Whether you accept it or not is irrelevant, because that's what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Whether you want to spin a story on it, like I just gave that a story a moment ago about what actually happened with this particular family, that's irrelevant. The suffering is still going to be there. You can deny it all you like, but you are still going to be suffering. And there's nothing that's going to change that. So truth is the authority, because it allows you to choose for yourself what you're going to do. That is the free will component of existence. That's why it's an authority.
So truth. Truth's authority lies in the choice of acceptance or denial.
Yeah,
it leaves each and every one of us.
Yeah, we all have that capacity. That's the random component of our existence, right? We get to decide, are we going to accept it or deny it, right? And that is the true authority. Anything that has authority leaves that open for you. It doesn't force it down your throat.
And denial shuts down awareness of how that choice actively contributes to the conditions that trigger violence and chaos, also known as slavery.
Yep. So
and slavery, of course, as we have already learned, doesn't exist in nature.
Yes. So it finishes off saying never has, never will. That's why the conditions that create slavery must be manufactured. So if you think about it, right, it's that acceptance or denial we all have that option to choose one of those. So
Absolutely.
once you accept truth, you are open to that understanding of the consequences to all expressions, not just yourself, but to everyone else. You understand that ripple effect. You know, when you drop the pebble in the pond, it ripples out, right? And it keeps going. And when it hits the outside of the pond, it comes back 3 times. You know, that's all there in nature. Those lessons are right there. It's showing you what will happen. So anything you do out will amplify 3 times back to you. You know, if you understand that, then you really can carefully consider what actions you take. But when you deny it, that's just not even in your awareness. Otherwise, you never deny it. And then without realizing it, you are part of that very violence and chaos and slavery that you're living under. You are actually consenting and actively partaking in it. That's the true nature of truth, right? Is that if you don't work with it and you work against it, you will be working for your own suffering. And the majority of the population doesn't even know that that's even the thing. If you were to raise this with them right now, they'll be like wanting to have you locked up.
Yes. And I think we might leave it at that point tonight, Fitz, because that is the last few slides, mate, leave a lot to think about, a lot of self-reflection in there.
Yeah, I'm really happy to leave it there because I just looked at the clock as well, so we're just close to the 1 hour mark anyway. Yeah,
well, that there's certainly a few head-turning bits in there tonight. 100%, mate. I'm blown away by some of that information. That it's all very new to me too. So thank you for putting that through. I'll just have a bit of a quick scan. Sorry about the porn bot in there, folks. It's hard for me to look after I've only got one screen I'm working on here at the moment, and it's hard to keep monitoring everything else that's going on. So I have, I think I've blocked it at any rate at this stage. So all good. I don't know about any other bots that are floating around through there. I'm just having a bit of a look for any questions. I saw one.
Saw someone saying they'd be happy to do moderating for you, Carl, in the comments. I don't know if you saw that one.
Oh, okay. Well, we might have to sort that out and figure out how to do it. I do have one question for someone. Feed the machine. I don't know what this is. Do you know much about UCC and OPPT laws?
UCC is Uniform Commercial Code. So that's the entire global structure runs off that. So what legislation is actually Uniform Commercial Code? So it's everything's under commerce. The other one, I haven't heard the abbreviation. I haven't heard that before.
No, neither have I. So if you want to throw that up in the comments, feed the machine before we're gone. Maybe you're still there. There you go. He just did. So what's OPPT mean? Feed the machine. If you could tell us that would be great.
Yeah, I haven't heard
that. Ricardo tomorrow night. Not at this stage. He told us last week that he wouldn't be able to make it this week. So I haven't heard any different, but who knows? Tomorrow morning I might get a phone call that changes all of that. Fingers crossed that won't be or that will be the case. But at this stage, no, Ricardo. There is a big show coming up on Friday, however. We're going to do the Friday free-for-all. We're taking it on the road, and Dave Graham is getting on the road. We're going to be in Hervey Bay on Friday night, doing the show live from a venue out the back of the Torquay Hotel. So we're looking forward to getting up to Hervey Bay. And apparently there's a seafood festival on Saturday, Fitz. So, gee, that's going to be awful. Just have to go and check out the seafood festival. Watch the whales.
Didn't you say you're not a big fan of fish?
Yeah, I don't mind calamari.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not a big fish eater. But having said that, sweet lip, coral trout, all that kind of... I'm right into that. I'll have that sort of fish any day. I grew up eating redfin as a kid, and it was very difficult choking on bones, redfin full of bones. And it's always had me very scared, so I've never wanted a bone in the throat.
I'll tell you what.
So Marianne will be coming to Melbourne. In fact, we'll be coming to Sydney. We'll be coming to an Outback pub somewhere in the start of September. And we are, going to head down the coast, do a little bit of forging on the Central Coast, going into Sydney, catch up with a few people in Sydney. We'll have a few nights in Sydney, I think, and hopefully catch up with Mrs. Cossack. And depending on how the appeal goes on September the 13th with the Aussie Cossack, we might be able to catch up with him. So, yeah, there's a few good things in the future that we're trying to put together. This month has just been hard to try and lock stuff down, in A, because we didn't know if Ricardo was going to be available, and B, didn't know whether or not we're going to be locked down ourselves and even able to travel. So that's one of the reasons that, we've been pushing that a bit. One People's Private Trust, OPP. One People's Private Trust?
Oh, I haven't heard that.
What OPPT? No. I don't know if anybody is aware, and I've got to get a hold. I owe Darren Bergworth a phone call from about 4 days ago. I believe Darren has kicked off in Victoria with the People's the People's Trust of Victoria, the PTV. If you're in Victoria, look into that, learn about that. I've actually had a conversation with a trust lawyer in Queensland about doing the same thing here. He hasn't rung me back yet. Well, I'll have to go away and have a think about that. So he's gone away to have a think about what we propose to do there, and hasn't rung me back. I can only think I'm going to need a new trust lawyer, but that's something we're going to talk about at a different time. Some people have asked us to explain the logo, Fitz.
Yeah, wow. I love it. Would you like to start on that one?
Well, I don't know where to start. What you're seeing on the screen with the logo is the culmination of a great many different things that we've been doing for the last 2 or 3 weeks now. So it took a lot to get to this point, and I don't really know why at the end of it. No, it was just really finding the elements, wasn't it, Fitz?
Yeah, look, the shield is Magna Carta on the knight. The knight has carrying the shield, and the sword is Article 61. That's what drives it in the heart of the whole system. Like, it splits it all open, and the shield, and the sword is symbolic of using the process and how to actually stand in your power. Now, if you have a look at Magna Carta, the words, it's actually got something organic running through it. So you've got the 2 roses on the outside, and you've got the actual stems of the roses, right? So Magna Carta is an organic expression of our consciousness. So that's symbolic of that. And obviously then you just got the Learning Center and the web address. So
and of course, there is the connotation of the knight where people are saying, yes, a soldier on his knees praying before battle. Yes, there is that element of that too.
Yep. So we're just hoping you guys like it, because a lot of effort came into bringing all these elements together.
And we forked out a bit of money in the last week to see what it looks like on a T-shirt, because maybe we'll start selling a few of them if people like them. But we've got to have we've done some experimental pressings. Is that what you do with T-shirts? Experimental printings, which I'll pick up, I think, on Thursday. So we'll have a bit of a look and see what we go from there. But we might have a T-shirt or a mug or something with the logo on it that you might be able to grab if you are of a mind. It would help us out, and it'll help get the message out. So thank you very much. Thanks, guys, for everybody who's put up a comment about it. I'm glad you like it. We like it too. It's come up really well, and Fitz has got to be thanked for all the work that he put in for getting all that done. We had a graphic artist who actually did the work, but Fitz dealt with her, and she's done a magnificent job, got to say. And so, Fitz, thank you very much for all your efforts in not just this one, but the other one we did as well.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I was just pleased that we was able to get to that final product. We were all really satisfied, and something to be proud of that we can stand behind. So that was totally worth it.
Yeah. So looking forward to being able to get that out and getting it on a shirt or on a hoodie or on a cup or on a cap or on anything. We'll see. Well, certainly it'll be on stickers, because trust me, they're the cheapest things to put it on at the moment. So we'll have a bit of that floating around. Then
just wanted to say thank you to Muzzle Flash, saying that I'm like a son to you. I'm touched. I don't know what else to say. Thank you.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, I know. I wasn't expecting that. So,
that's wonderful.
That's a little warm and fuzzy moment.
Muzzle Flash, are you an alien as well? Oh, sorry, that was just.
Yeah, I had to do that, didn't I? Couldn't help it. That just came out involuntarily.
I did. Exactly right. Exactly right. All right, folks. Thank you very much for your attendance in tonight for Magna Carta lesson number 12. We're back again next week, same time, same channel, unless for some reason we're banned. In which case we'll be on Voice of Freedom and uploaded to Project Matilda as well. But tonight I think we're on 2 Facebook pages, 2 YouTube channels, and a Twitter channel. God help us, anything's possible. Don't think with the use of the juicy dart, I think we've avoided any way we're going to get shot off the air for this show. So thanks, Fitz.
Good night, everyone. Thank
I
you for tuning in
appreciate
again. It was a real joy to have you with us again.
Yeah, we've loved having you, folks. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you again next week.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's rock!